Hello again. My continuing revisitation of Iron Crown Enterprises MERP, and I want to bring us to the Gray Mountains. In the in the books, in the big maps, Gray Mountains is that chain of mountains that runs across the top of the map that caps the Misty Mountains like so. It's this chain of mountains. They're actually very old and part of the original encircling mountains, or uh, the ones that Morgoth used as his fortress. Now, this particular book is a source book by every standard that anybody has ever conceived of a source book, but for purposes of MERP and or ICE, I don't know what they call it, a campaign book. Now, I don't know if I have another book that's actually called a campaign book by them. I know that that might have been their intentions, but I guess when you're in this business, you kind of explore with new concepts every now and then when you do them. Let's see. This one was produced in 1992, so we're getting in toward the latter part of MERP's run, and not necessarily a bad thing as a campaign book, but in the tradition of Middle Earth, of ICE's Middle Earth, they go into some pretty great detail in not just the locations, geography, the plants and animals, but NPCs, adventures, the whole thing's in here. Now, the mentions in the book and in the games, the Grey Mountains, at some point, Durin's folk, a bunch of the dwarves went north, built some citadel, built some, some facilities and small towns and moderate-sized citadels up there while they were exploiting for raw materials and rare gemstones. It's also an area that's just thick with both orcs and dragons. The big dragon everybody knows about, of course, is Smog. I've had arguments as to what particular type of dragon he is. Most people agree that he was a big red, although some insist that he was not quite something else. What? Speaking of dragons, oh, we got a dragon here. What? Is this a dragon? Is this what dragon? This is Sprout. She was living at Mom's house and having my mother's two chihuahuas drove her crazy, but now that Mom passed on, Sprout is now living in the RV with the wife and I until we find ourselves our own home. Uh, the Gray Mountains. In no other source book in MERP do I find as comprehensive list of dragons and dragon related material than in this book. I don't know why that is, other than the fact that they didn't use, since the novels didn't use, other than Smog, didn't use dragons a whole lot as NPCs or potential encounters, because in MERP it's kind of a given that you need an army to take on a dragon. Even a small dragon is going to mess you up. And the idea of a lone dragon slayer riding out to beard the beast in his own den is absurd. And in truth, is in D&D in most game systems, if you play a dragon well, there's very few parties that stand a chance. I'm just saying, right? The ones that you're going to actually have a chance against are the young ones or the stupid ones, because a smart, powerful dragon is a foe not to be taken lightly. And that's neither here nor there, and I'm sure as a GM you've all run them. So you know what I'm talking about if you really want to take them. In Middle Earth, the dragons are even that more potent, right? But as I'm saying, this one here deals with what I like about, and I've said it before, what I like about these books is the level of historical detail that they build into. Speaking of dragons, here's my stats. They talk about Smog right here. Okay. He was a level 60, level 66 after third age 2770. So he had already been a level 70 by the time Bilbo started messing with him. How brave is that? Dumb, because Bilbo didn't know any better. That's why he wouldn't have done it. Dragon after dragon after dragon. There's like 5 of them right here. The book itself deals with it's broken down. So this section is talking about the dragons of the Whithered Hearth and along the mountains. For the most part, they sleep a lot. They don't. It's rare when they all get up at the same time, so to speak. And after over the centuries, they spend more time fighting among themselves than they do terrorizing the locals. But I have to wonder if they're one of the now it's never been discussed that I've ever read, but one of the reasons that the northern half of the Unadin Valley, northern Mirkwood, and the Vale of the Valley is so underpopulated. Now they blame some of that on the plague that took place in the 1600s, but I think that for the lion's share of the history of Middle Earth, it's because it's just too damn close to where most of the dragons hang out. And what are dragons going to do when they wake up? They're hungry and they want stuff. So what do? They go south. And instead of flying all the way south to Gondor, historically speaking, that doesn't happen in the books. So I don't, that's an awful long ride, even for a dragon. So they terrorize the local within 500 miles of them of their home, and that tends to make people not want to really heavily develop an area because you're just increasing the dragon's larder. Such as it is. History of the Grey Mountains, the Elder Days, the Trials of Durin's Folk, the Dragon's Attack, Grey Mountains in the later era. Look at that. See that? Look at that artwork. That's some pretty potent stuff. That's Skeeth the Dragon, one of the nasty small older brother, I think. If I remember what I read here the other day. Let's see. Brief timeline. We get into the land, the Great Mountains, the Narrows, the Northern Wastes, the Whithered Hearth, climatic weather chart. Let's see once again. Weather chart. Gotta love the weather. Location map. Can't remember if this thing came with a map or not. Flora and fauna, dark creatures, trolls, other creatures, orcs, spell beasts, undead. That's one thing, like I've said, mentioned before with MERP. MERP is not monster heavy. You have a nice selection, but you don't have this ever-ending addition that you get from like Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is all about that sort of thing. So we have literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of beasties, magical creations to go up against, and that's because as a fan base, the fans keep coming up with good ideas, and the company cashes in on them, and the company keeps looking for new ways to build up another book, and yet another book, and yet another book. So I'm not going to go into a diatribe on that. It has its advantages and disadvantages. Okay, peoples and cultures. Like I said, in the MERP itself, they picked a generic time of the Third Age. The year was 1640-ish to be most of the. There's always a theme of adventures in all the books that focus on that year. Then they break it up into some other years. So you got Third Age 2580, which is closer to the time of the War of the Ring, but 1640 is several thousand years earlier, and more your locations are still populated, and at this point, Moria is still intact in the hands of the dwarves, and you get the dwarves building, colonies, if you will, in the Grey Mountains. And if you went and played this during the time of the War of the Ring, it would be a vastly different set of books, mostly ruins. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, I guess, but it is what it is. Ice Orcs. It's a unique, not a different species, just a species that developed to deal with a different terrain. Very unique in this particular game system to see that. We have a list of the more famous dwarves: Dane the First, Thor. You want to know the stats, information on Thrain's old man. He's in here. The Ice Orcs, of course, some of their leaders. Bjorn, he's one of the shapeshifters. Let's see. Then we get into places of note. Nordum, this is one of those dwarvish. Let's see what it says. Neither the oldest or largest of the Grey Mountain colonies, Nordum is the capital of Durin's Folk. Upset. So it goes into stuff you need to know: mining tunnels, avenues, lighting, torches, lamps, lanterns, fireplaces, deadfall traps, pit traps, so on and so forth. And then a tradition of MERP of trying to make a map of a dwarven citadel of a city is very difficult. And hopefully I can locate my copy of Moria. That was one of the ones I read the most. You know, I don't know how many people read when they're going to the John, but I'm one of those guys, and I had Moria. For some reason, Moria and the Death Star was both, the campaign book were both on the shelf right next to my, you know, facility. So I sent a lot of it. But this was the style of map system they used for Dwarven citadels and stuff in most part because of the sheer size of it. It just lays out the main avenues and the main thoroughfares and key caverns, if you will. And then they went and broke down detail of some of those locations and more smaller locations, which you got to do so. There's only so much you can do with a map, and you have limitations. So this is going on about this particular place. You know, that lots of material. We're still working on it. And this is, you know, this is why it's considered a campaign, I guess, because all this stuff's interlinked with a theme. Dwarves are starting. The Dwarven cities are starting to stop communicating with Moria and their cousin Dum, and you're hired to go north to figure out why. I think that's what the premise was. And we got Solid Nose, located high up on the northern eastern spur of the Grey Mountains beyond the Whithered Hearth, is the fabled Solel Nost, city of the Dwarvish Loved. So we got yet another city, which goes into some great length here. A lot of good stuff on city dwarves. Of course, most of these great cavern complexes and stuff in Middle Earth, like in a lot of other fantasy settings, were created by or created via the dwarves, because that's what they do, right? You don't see we got a really good book on an Orcish citadel, and it's nowhere near as tidy. The maps are a lot more, you know, what you'd expect it to be. So the Trail of the Grits. Now, this is a unique thing. This particular adventure, or that I've encountered. Apparently, a group of orcs are under the thrall of an undead orc chieftain, and he basically absorbs their energy if they don't keep bringing him live sacrifices. So, you know, you're actually trying to. There's a blurb in here somewhere where it says the head, the living head of the orc tribe will actually, if he thinks your party's powerful enough to take out the Gretch, he's likely to have those people hold his orcs back and let you go through and go take out his, you know, his thorn, and then try to kill him. So, you know, definitely got some story to it. We got our orc cave and our orc caverns. Once again, so much different from the Dwarven layout, more natural, so I guess. Haphazard. Oh, the task. We got a giant encounter, bears, wolves, and Morrison the giant. Hey, we got a friendly giant. If they, or you know, annoy him, he's actually upset because the orcs keep raiding his animal stock and taking them off, and he's as giants go, he's no more smarter than most of them, but he is puzzled as to why the orcs keep taking the sheep away alive, because they're not known for doing that. They usually slaughter them on the spot. So he knows there's something going on, and he's willing to, you know, pay the party a gemstone or two if they can give him proof that they've eliminated the orcs as a threat to his existence. Then we got our dwarves treasure. Always a fun thing there. Layouts the road of Ballingen's Gate. Cave of the Berloig, wherever that is. I'm not going to read it at the moment. The tasks, Ligger's Worst Night. So we got a number of adventures. We're dealing with some of the Northmen towns now, merchants, NPCs. All right, so we're getting into our, you know, like I said, NPC charts and stuff. I bet if I found it someplace, I went and I took most of these NPC charts and I photocopied them and put them all into a binder. That way I had this ready-made binder of ever increasing number of NPCs to grab and snatch when I needed them, just so I didn't have to always run around with a set of books that didn't belong to the game that I was playing. Because I'd always occasionally would have a player go, hey, what are you bringing that one along for? Because we're not playing that. Your business. I'll ask you why you keep bringing those particular Cheetos to the table, but it is what it is, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. So, like I said, the Gray Mountains. There you go. Till next time, my friends.